Hello, everyone. My name is Njari Dimario Anderson. I am a fifth year senior in the Brown RISD dual degree program. I will be graduating with a BFA in sculpture from RISD and then a BA in modern cultural media from Brown. I, holistically view myself as an artist, writer, and cultural researcher. Um, and to just be fully transparent, those of you who've seen me present before know I don't present in a very orthodox format. So bear with me as I flip through these images, which none of which will be my work, but I hope in some ways they provide some context into the things that I have viewed or looked at or studied in order to develop um, my practice. I'm gonna get back to what I've written now. My capstone presentation is a wordy, rushed arrangement of words and ideas, free-flowing thoughts, broken into nonsensical chapters, followed by a series of long overdue but necessary thank yous. This is all just a clever way to say that I'm doing this presentation to allow myself a bit of room to say words I've worked extremely hard to find, which may not even be the right words at all. These past 5 years have been extremely challenging. So to allow myself a bit of levity, I stand here not to perform for you as an artist or a student. I'm here as me, not trying to hide behind the shiny veneer of this podium or this presentation, but me unequivocally. The images that you see here on screen are a sample of things pulled from my many archives. These archives include references, memes, musings, and generally visually interesting things I've collected over the past 5 years that now routinely manifest in my artistic practice. So if I happen to bore you during this presentation, at least you have something interesting to look at. To be totally frank, I didn't want to do a capstone. This is the most tired I've ever been in my life, and the only thing I desire at the moment is a bed and a good night of sleep. I say this fully aware of the fact that I stayed up all night writing this to make this presentation feasible, but like I said, I'm not here to hide anything. The last 2 or 3 months or so have been extremely challenging for me. I'm notoriously terrible at dealing with major life changes. I was hoping I'd graduate and avoid the awkward stage of this transition process where I'd come to realize I liked college and that I'd miss being in classes surrounded by people my age and the awkward yet strangely infectious atmosphere of campus. However, this opportunity to summarize my time here has given me the chance to reflect in a way I hope is as enlightening for you as it was for me. Part 1. Searching for opacity. You never realize how difficult it is to go to two schools for 5 years until you get to the last year and you realize the amount of work it's taken for you to get to this point. I was reminded quite starkly about this as I was leaving my MCM department graduation ceremony. A lady in the audience came up to me to say how sorry she was I didn't have a social life in college. I took what she said with a grain of salt. This backhanded acknowledgement of my hard work came veiled behind the word congratulations. This wasn't my first time hearing this, but I wish she hadn't been able to read me so easily. From the list of accolades tacked onto mine during the reading of the degree recipients' names. For all my efforts to remain ambiguous and opaque, the stranger saw right through me in a matter of seconds. This made me wonder if everyone else was able to read me so easily. How a brief list of things I had achieved exposed me to such scrutiny that it could shake my emotional foundation so easily. In truth, I don't know if I was ever really ready for college. There's no right way to do college, but I keep thinking to myself if I could go back and change a few things, maybe I'd sleep more, work a little less, or say yes to more invitations. Maybe I'd be more spontaneous and outgoing. Maybe a little bit more open to new things. Maybe I'd go back and learn to play an instrument or commit to those on campus salsa lessons that I'd pick up for a few weeks only to drop. Or maybe I'd just do the whole thing over. The BIPOC first gen low income single parent household student handbook they hand out during orientation week doesn't have any tips for how to work through this without anxiety, loneliness, or hypervisibility. And to say I was anxious about entering college would be an understatement. I think the only thing I had confidence in when I first arrived here was my ability to make art. But even that was stamped out fairly quickly because you learn how truly small your worldview is once you move away from your hometown. This realization made my life especially difficult because the only coping mechanism I had for this overwhelming feeling of anxiety was to work more. My severe anxiety mixed with my fears made it difficult for me to navigate college, like most, which only emphasized the distance I unintentionally put between myself and others. I learned to hyperfixate on work and bettering my practice to dissociate from these feelings that grip my heart and lungs so tightly. I attributed my need for wanting to be better to my work ethic, but a lot of it stemmed from wanting to be approved in a country that no matter how long I lived here, I'd never feel native to. I was never told how just a few memories from my adolescence would fundamentally shape my life even now. I was never told how hard it would be to assimilate to the US when my only lens into American culture came from the bootleg movies and TV shows that made their way to Jamaica. Ones my cousins and I watched on repeat when the TV wasn't occupied by adults in the evening news. In my first 2 weeks in an American school, I was bullied for speaking Patois, which taught me the dangers of difference and the power of silence. From then on, Patois would only be spoken in secret, only to people who I was sure were Jamaican and no one else. In middle school, I learned about art tutors and what a privilege it was to be able to afford them. Luckily, I was clever enough and learned about the value of the internet and the 10-minute how-to art videos I watched relentlessly trying to bridge the gap between myself and others. In high school, I learned about the power of ignorance and the kind of deadly weapon it becomes when wielded by the right people. Time and time again, I was told how my admission to an Ivy League school was due in part to affirmative action, despite the fact that I passed all the same classes that they did. The truth is, lucky or not, I was just happy that I got into any school at all. Part 2. Searching for ghosts, searching for me. The first few years of college were especially difficult for me for more reasons than just my bouts with anxiety. COVID hit the spring semester of my freshman year, and just a few months after we went into lockdown, I lost my grandmother. In the spring of the following year, I'd lose my grandfather, and in the fall of junior year, I'd lose a dear friend of mine from high school. I wasn't sure how to process these passings, especially because my only coping mechanism at the time involved occupying myself with work because I didn't know a better way to move forward. Eventually, these ghosts, these feelings I pushed aside, caught up to me, and as I struggled to get back to anything close to the feeling of normal, I come to realize that I didn't know myself much or anything else about the world that didn't involve me making art. I blame this partly on masculinity's fixation with being productive, and partly on the fact that I only just found the words to navigate these feelings for myself healthily. But much of the work I made during this time was while I was suffering silently in a state of confusion. As the accomplishments piled on, and I'll list them here, 28 art shows, 11 awards, 10 written publications featuring my work, five published writings of my own, 4 fellowships, 3 residencies, and 2 degrees in 5 years. I found it harder and harder to find fulfillment not only in these things, but in anything that wasn't directly linked to my ability to create art. Soon the momentary joy of a press release or a show announcement wore off quickly, and I'd be left more anxious than before looking for the next project or goal to distract myself with. Un- Please understand that when I say this, I'm by no means attempting to be condescending. I understand the immense privilege these accomplishments attached to my name, but for a while it was all I had. The art world is fickle, spiteful, and confusing, even more so because I am young and black and in terms of a commodity, replaceable. I was scared to be anything other than perfect. Outside of my work, I had no sense of self or place, and within my work I was left feeling empty. It took me as long as it did to write this because I'm still in the process of relearning not only myself, but the things that motivated me to make art in the first place. I realized I lost a sense of who I was at the moment, and I couldn't talk about the thought process that motivated the creation of my works. The most exciting process of making for me was always the ways the ideas would shift when I was introduced to a new image or reference to study from. I started making these image archives because I was interested in the conversations that originated by grouping the things that inspired me. I'm naturally interested in pattern, order, juxtaposition, and what it means to make a deliberate decision to compare things. When I'd stare at things for too long as a kid, my grandma would put her hands over my eyes to remind me how rude it was to look for too long. Ironically, I also never liked taking photos of myself. I was aware of the kind of discomfort I felt looking at myself critically through a lens I couldn't direct. This past year has been an opportunity for me to step back and look at myself at a less critical lens, and with more grace. So I can now publicly admit to not only myself, but to you that I struggle with a lot of things, many of which I'm still navigating now. And that compared to the person I was 5 years ago, and during the bulk of my time here, the person I am now is a blank slate shaped by the hands of many. To my grandmothers, Yvonne and Gloria, to whom I dedicate my Brown degree, to my aunts, Ada and Natoya, my cousins, PJ, Raj, Kyle, and many more who I can't now name them all, but owe so much of my being to Jav, Shanrik, Damani, to my best friends, Aiden, Ethan, and Jaleel, my arms, legs, and eyes, whom I envy for your kindness, selflessness, and your steadfastness in my life. To the Hoskins family, Nicole and Fitzgerald, thank you for your guidance, your presence, and your persistence, for which I am forever grateful, and for raising two of the most brilliant human beings, my chosen siblings, Ethan, my best friend, and Aaron, whom I aspire to be like every day. To Ms. Shioma for her unending wisdom and patience, for her commitment to being a positive force in my life when I was too busy to check in, and for caring for me as if I was her own son. To Michelle Zager, Ludney Denise, Venicia Eli, Wilthoni Johnson, you four invisible hands now made visible have changed me for the better in ways I will forever be grateful for. To my professors and mentors, Ben Jurgensen, Derek Woods Morrow, David Udris, Avery Willis Hoffman, Heather Rowe, Gail Dodge, Lou Heinz, Jonas Levy, Lacey Van Reeth, Dominic Malone, Deb Clemens, Chris Samuelson, Laura Ostrander, and Lisi Raskin, for allowing me to stumble and fall and pick myself up. Without you all, I am a shell of the person I am standing here today. All of you would bet on me in some way or another, and I hope to one day do the same for others what you have done for me. To my friends, my dual degree family, my Project Thrive family, my sculpture family, my MCM family, for watching me grow up despite the growing pains, and for welcoming me into your communities and embracing me and my work over these past few years. And for the woman who has raised me through nearly all of it. Can you stand up, please? A special thank you to my mom, whom I dedicate my RISD degree to. Over a decade ago, you and I left Jamaica on a plane bound to the US with next to nothing in our name. I didn't understand much of the world then, and I'm still trying to navigate my way through it now. But few would have been willing to make the sacrifices you did to raise me. But I work as hard as I do because I see you and I learn from you constantly. A few years ago, when I was organizing our bookshelf, I found an assignment you did for an English class you took when we first moved to the States. You wrote that all you wanted to do was to provide a good life for your son. I hope that my standing here affirms that you've done just that, and that as I move forward, trying to define my path, I have and will continue to strive to make you proud. Thank you all. And to the person I become, I hope that in the future I'll have more opportunities to rest and reflect on the things that come my way. As for what else the future has in store for me, everything else is to be determined. Thank you.